trying to figure a way out of this without doing all the retaliatory things that should have happened after losing a U-2 and our aerial surveillance over Cuba. But somehow we got out of it.
What was your feeling during these days of crisis when we were on the brink of a nuclear war as a young Marine officer aboard that ship?
Well, at that time I was worried about my family at home. I mean, I figured we were in a Navy ship at sea and probably in the safest place you could be in the world, and I worried about what might happen on the home front if there were a nuclear war. I never realized at the time that we would have been the first step one of a nuclear war at sea.
Mm-hmm. Well, you came through harm's way and then found yourself in harm's way again, up close and personal in a combat zone in Vietnam. And we'll talk about that in a moment when we come back. Notice that the vocals seem to ride above the mix.
It's about you. It's about you. It's about me. It's about me. It's about you. It's about CCU. It's about you. It's all about you. It's about me. It's about us. It's about CCU. Coastal Carolina University. It's about you.
Welcome back to Military Memoirs. We're speaking on our program today with Lieutenant Colonel Larkin Spivey, who did a tour of duty as a Marine Corps officer in Vietnam in 1966 and 1967. What was your primary job there in Vietnam?
Well, at first I was the company commander of a reconnaissance company. Our job was to screen our bases from attack by mainly VC, Viet Cong guerrilla units. And so we constantly had patrols out in the mountains with a different patrol route just about every day, looking for enemy activity, and if found, reporting it and calling in supporting arms if we were able to at the time.
Mm-hmm. So for 9 years the United States was involved in war with North Vietnam, in Vietnam, trying to keep the North Vietnamese at a line from invading South Vietnam. And in the end, after the United States was generally disengaged and had turned the war over to the South Vietnamese, all of that crumbled and the North Vietnamese took over the country. At the time that you were there, what did you feel like your mission was? What was the big picture and the charge that you felt like had you there in Vietnam?
Well, for most of my tour duty, I was a company commander of a rifle company, and we were operating along the DMZ, which is the northernmost region of South Vietnam. And our mission was to find and engage North Vietnamese penetrations into South Vietnam. And so it was a constant series of operations, patrols, probes, and when we encountered the enemy, we engaged and did whatever it took to defeat them at that spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, this war was controversial at the time, and it's been proven since that the lessons learned in Vietnam, both strategically, tactically, politically, were lessons that really have made a difference. And some historians and military experts have argued that the success of military operations in places like Iraq and the First Persian War really were a result of the lessons learned in Vietnam, which certainly made it a successful war from that point of view.
Right. Well, I guess the biggest lesson that we learned and demonstrated was the shock and awe concept of maximum everything for the mission at that moment. And don't send American troops unless you're going to send everything.
And American forces were engaged on the ground with two principal enemies, the Viet Cong, and they were kind of a regular force, and the NVA, the North Vietnamese Regular Army. How would you describe the differences in the Viet Cong and the NVA, and what kind of enemy were they to face?
Well, I didn't face all of the different types of VC units. During the time I was in reconnaissance, we encountered a lot of small VC units moving through the mountains, generally down toward some built-up area to do some raid or ambush. And we invariably defeated these units when we encountered them. They generally had light weapons, mortars. Later in the war, they did have rockets and some bigger weapons. But contrary to that, the North Vietnamese Army came with everything. I mean, they were a regular army, well-trained, well-equipped, well-disciplined, smart troops with artillery support and even in many cases tank support. And they came to fight and to fight whatever they encountered on the battlefield.
So the Viet Cong, basically unconventional guerrilla-style warfare, but the NVA, the North Vietnamese Regular Army, that was conventional warfare, and they were tough.
Right, they sure were.
What was your, in your term of service over there, 13 months, correct?
Right.
And that was a typical tour in terms of length?
Yes.
And what was the morale of the Marines there that you served with? What did they feel like they were fighting for, and how did they view it all? And how did you view it?
Well, I usually learn in retrospect that I was naive about a lot of things, but at the time, as a young officer in the Marine Corps in Vietnam, I felt I had the most highly motivated professional troops that anybody's ever had in combat. We were fortunate that we were not in the middle of civilian populaces with booby traps and ambushes and things that, well, we couldn't tell who we were fighting, but we knew who we were fighting, and we knew what the job was, and we knew it was difficult. But my Marines were magnificent.
American Marines in Vietnam, well-trained and dedicated.
Yes.
And when you look back at that from this, what are the memories about those men that have stuck with you the most?
Well, they were frequently undersupplied, underfed, short on everything, and they made an art of complaining and usually formulating everything in a joke. But they looked after each other. I think what motivates men in combat is mainly to look good in each other's eyes. I don't think the glory of democracy or fighting for freedom means that much to a young Marine in combat. I think he's trying to make sure that he doesn't let his buddies down. And I just saw so many heroic young men do heroic things to not let each other down that it was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Those are good troops, those Marines,
yeah,
in Vietnam. Now you were involved in the Battle for Hill 861 in what would become a real a famous place in that war and in Marine Corps history, a place called Khe Sanh.
Right.
And you earned the Bronze Star, the Navy Commendation Medal, the Vietnam Cross of Gallantry, combat action ribbons, others. What was that like there at Khe Sanh? What were you trying to do, and what was the toughest thing about it in combat?
Well, at the time, it was just another operation to find suspected North Vietnamese penetrations. Khe Sanh was a little place up in the very northwestern corner of South Vietnam. And for a long time, we had kept a small unit there, and we had done reconnaissance patrols around there just to kind of keep an eye on what was going on. And in early 1967, it became apparent that something was going on. Our recon patrols made contacts, and we had several units that were based at Quezon hadn't made contacts, and so